Russian Armenian population comes from. Well, the likelihood it doesn't come from the United States or France, you see, is that I think we can be pretty sure of. And you find out that approximately around 2001 and so on, there must be about 1 million Armenians, 950,000, 1 million who come directly from Armenia. And this is the optimistic scenario. That is, I am considering that, let's say, all the refugees from Baku, Kirovabad, Ganje, and so on, went to Russia. So this is how you find out that, you know, these people must have come from somewhere. And that somewhere is Armenia. The problem with the concentration, the emergence of the super diaspora, is that it is not really a diaspora yet. When we talk about Russian Armenians, we are talking about various sub-entities. There are the old Armenians of Moscow and St. Petersburg who were there in late Soviet times, from the 60s onward, even sometimes from the 1950s onward. Some of them having lost their Armenian language and so on, many of them having worked, you know, within the Soviet state or scientific apparatus, okay? So this is one type of Armenian. There are people who went there as early as the beginning of the crisis, you know, under Gorbachev during the, you know, in 85 on, okay? Others went there in, you know, in 91, 92 when things got worse. And then you have literally the poorer, more migrant people who went there later on, at the end of the Bedrosian years or under the Caucasian years. These people overall are not organized, they are not structured very solidly as communities. They don't have a tradition as a diaspora, and they are also a very significant factor, means of pressure by Russia on Armenia if need be. No. That is, the increase of the Russian Armenian diaspora is a factor that must be considered in Russian-Armenian relations when you think politically and strategically for the future. Okay? This having been said, let's move to the sixth trend, which is the Armenian concentration in southern Russia and the emergence of what is known as xenophobia, the dislike, the phobia against dark people, darker people. We are not talking about black people, you know. We are talking about dark hair, darker skinned people, people from the Caucasus. Armenians, Azerbaijanis, Georgians, people who don't look Slavic. Okay? Today, there is a remarkable concentration in places like the Krasnodar Krai, Stavropol, especially around the Black Sea coast in some areas as the sub-district of Adler, where it was estimated around 2000 that more than 35% of the population there was Armenian. The estimates again vary about the number of the people living in those areas. There are local academics doing research, there are people in the Academy of Science of Russia doing research. The estimates in 1999 varied from 500,000 to 800,000 Armenians in those areas. The difficulty with finding the right number, the exact number, is the fact that a lot of the Armenians living in those areas do not have what is known in Russian as propiski, that is registration permit to live there. That is, they are not officially, you know, they don't have residency permits. So they don't exactly participate in censuses or things like that. And it is difficult to know what the exact number is. It is these people who are exposed to xenophobia. I created a word, blackophobia, referring to the fear and dislike of darker skin, non-Slavic minorities, often referred to as persons of Caucasian nationality. Okay? This dislike is totally understandable. because of the massive socio-economic dislocation resulting from the arrival of different people having different habits, particularly adept at commercial activities, whereas the Russians in those areas are come more from an agrarian background, you know, okay. People who tend to be quite crafty, you know, and thus a number of stereotypes have emerged against those Armenians as being, you know, the typical things, deceiving, crooks, parasites taking advantage of the system, and so on and so forth. A lot of those Armenians tend to live in fear because they are exposed from time to time to the aggression of various Cossack units in southern Russia. I have various very striking quotations from some of those Cossack atamans, leaders, and also from various governors of the Krasnodar district who do not hide their dislike for these speculators, illegal speculators, settling in the midst of this nice population in southern Russia. So racism has emerged, and this is, for example, what an interview with one of the governors in Krasnodar. His name is Nikolai Kondratenko. In Mashtots, the Armenian newspaper of Krasnodar in 2000, he is saying they kicked us out of the Baltics, Moldavia, the Transcaucasus, and Central Asia, where Russians had lived for centuries, protecting the indigenous peoples there from destruction and enslavement, helping them to preserve their national character. And no one has asked the question, what have we done to the Russians, and for what? And he's continuing, the demographic imbalance on the Black Sea coast, rapidly being settled by the new, quote-unquote, Armenians, makes us very anxious. And he continues, discussing the Armenians as and the fact that they represent a threat to that area and so on. Okay? So you can have a sense of the overall mood in that place, and it is fortunate that the generally good relations between the Armenian government and Russia, and probably some interventions by people like the Prime Minister Vladimir Putin and others, is you know, keeping a lead on the possibility of mass violence against Armenians in that area. Seventh trend, the new diasporans in the West, alienations, ghettoization, criminality. By the new diasporans, I am referring approximately to the various waves of former Soviet Armenians, or people coming from Armenia, each one with different characteristics. From the mid-70s to the mid-80s, you are dealing essentially, most of the people who left Armenia, a high proportion of them at least, were the former Hayrenatards or their descendants. Okay? Then came another wave of people, several waves of people leaving Armenia. These were not automatically Hayrenatards. They settled in various places, but essentially, as we know, in California, and a particular attitude has emerged toward them among Armenians themselves, you know, particular attitude, stereotypes. They are said to be lazy, crafty, lacking work ethics, schemers, in some cases violence. In a nutshell, there is a divide, and whether we like it or not, between the perception that some Armenians have of these others. And I must tell you that exactly a similar phenomenon is taking place in various areas in Russia, between the Armenians who have been there for 30 years, for example, in Krasnodar. These people, they call themselves the Peniks, you know, the indigenous ones, okay? They have been there, they consider themselves as regular, normal Russian citizens, you know, they do things well, they have no problem. And then they see the new Armenians, you know, who left Armenia in the 1990s, came to Krasnodar, and there is a crisis between the Punics of Deratsis and the newcomers known as the Dursetsis.